I just feel like there's work Ashley on one side and there's real Ashley on the other side. And all I want to do is to bring them closer together. Like, I just want that alignment. And it's funny because a big reason why I started my own business in the end is because I wanted to bring those two pieces of myself together. I wanted to feel more whole. And it has been a really strong and clear North Star for me that I want to be able to show up in any space I'm in and be my whole self. And that includes being, a high profile executive, right? But also a mom and also a creative and also a curious learner and a community member. And that's really important to me, so much so that those are the spaces that I seek out. Where can I be my whole person, my whole self? And it's required a lot of bravery, that's for sure, because it's not the default mode for a lot of us.
Welcome to Women and Work, the show where we take an inside look at how women are overcoming our own unique challenges as we grow our careers or build a business while nurturing relationships and family. I'm Diane Moca, founder and CEO of MomSub, the childcare app that connects you to a substitute mom. And I want you to know that work can fit your life. Our guests show you the way they've done it. Today, I'm with Ashley Jablow. She is the founder of Wayfinders Collective and Life Design School, where she helps women in transition navigate questions of purpose and fulfillment. Thanks for being here, Ashley.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, Diane. It's really a treat.
Excellent. Well, you have quite the impressive background. You worked as a Presidential Innovation Fellow at the White House and as a professor at Georgetown University. And now you're a coach, guiding people through uncertainty, burnout, and reinvention, very important areas. And I wonder if those are obstacles you overcame yourself. Do you think that women have particular challenges in those areas because we are female?
What a powerful question to start with, Diane. I mean, I'm struck hearing you share back to me part of my story, how much my work now is helping women who are in situations much like the ones I have been in. So I have faced burnout. I have faced career reinvention. I've certainly faced it all while navigating the realities of being a working mother, let alone daughter and wife and community member and all of that. So, boy, I feel like I'm in the right place today to have a conversation about how women navigate all of this. And to your question, I do think that women face unique challenges. And one of my curiosities, I suppose, is also how women can leverage our unique position, orientation, way of seeing the world to actually create careers and lives that work for us. I often think like your work isn't working for you if you can't show up authentically and work in a way that fits your whole life. So yeah, that's something I'm just sort of curious about is like what makes women uniquely positioned to design work that fits our whole lives.
And we are good at being people pleasers, right? And so the people we forget to please, we all know ourselves.
Mm.
So how did you come to the career that you were? Let's go back a little to, when you were young and imagining your future, right? Because that's kind of where it starts. Were you imagining the future that you wanted, no doubts about it? Or were there influences where I should do this, I should do that, parents expect this, community expects that? What happened to you and how did that evolve and affect the person you became?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's that question of nature versus nurture, right? I have always been very ambitious and maybe even a little competitive when it comes to my career. And so I think naturally I have always wanted to go for the gold, so to speak, like what is the biggest, baddest job I can find? Now, it may have helped or I suppose hurt that I grew up also in a community that was very success oriented. I went to a very competitive all girls school for middle and high school where it was really clear, never overtly stated, but very clear, just even through kind of the oxygen in the air, that if I didn't want to become the first woman president of the United States and cure cancer at the same time, then like there was something wrong with me, right? So am very naturally ambitious, and I think a lot of that ambition was channeled in the direction of what other people and what my culture growing up told me I should want. And so the first, I don't know, 10, 15 years of my career were really determined by what's going to be, the best, what's going to look great on paper, what's going to be the brand that I want to be affiliated with, like the best college, the best graduate school, the best, first job out of college. I mean, I was fortunate. I worked at the White House of all places, right? I had the word presidential in my title, really driven to achieve and to have something to show for my success in that way. And I'll admit, in many ways, it was really gratifying. It felt great. And I hope that I did some good work in those places, right? But it actually wasn't until I got laid off unexpectedly after leaving the White House and was working in the private sector that I really had to grapple with, whose version of success am I chasing? What does that really mean to me? And particularly at that point in my life, having a young child, how am I going to create a career that not only is meaningful and allows me to be ambitious in a way that's authentic for me, but that also is going to get me home, in time for dinner, so to speak. So, yeah, lots of big questions.
So tell me the conversations that went on in your life, in your head, and with the others involved, spouse, husband, co-parent, whatever, when you had your first child, when, you were planning for your child. Was there ever a time that you even flirted with the idea of, well, maybe I step back from my career or give it up or change it, or was it always like, no, everyone out there on social media is doing it all, I can do it all? And what were your ideals, and then what reality hit you in the face?
Hmm. What comes to mind is actually, so first to answer your question, I always knew I wanted to be a mom. And I always knew I wanted to have a career. And I grew up with my mom as a single mom, an entrepreneur. She even now is a role model in business and in life for me. And I just grew up, 80s, 90s, like women can do everything, right? Like that was the message. That was the memo we all received. So really there was never any question in my mind that I wouldn't be able to find balance or wouldn't be able to figure it out. I look back on my younger self and give myself a lot of grace and also recognize how naive I was to think that I could just have a baby and sort of fold him into my life, right? And my career. And probably the best example of that, my son was 15 months old when I got the call from the Obama administration saying that I had 6 weeks to move my family from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. to begin my fellowship with the White House. And, I mean, I knew that was kind of nuts. And also, there was no question. I mean, it was like if President Obama comes calling, I pick up the phone, right? So, my amazing husband, Dan, is always up for an adventure, And so he was like, sure, let's do it. Let's give it a try. And in hindsight, I mean, oh my gosh, Diane, I had no idea the impact that that one decision was going to have on the course of my life, let alone my son's life, right? But I will never forget sitting on the front steps of my house in San Mateo, California at the time, and just talking to my husband, talking to my parents, like, am I really going to work at the White House at the same time I have a baby, and like, how am I going to do that? And how is that going to work? And what kind of childcare do we need? And, walking into my fellowship and there were 27 of us. I think there were three women in the fellowship, and two of us were moms. And so we really had to work differently than pretty much everyone else in the fellowship program. So I didn't realize, I guess to answer your question, I didn't realize I was setting myself up to experience the friction and also to push myself to start making decisions differently at that point in my career. It was certainly a crash course in the myth of work-life balance, that's for sure.
And being in an administration that many people from the outside would say, well, if anyone's going to be accommodating and understanding of working moms, right, it would be that administration. So I wonder, did this happen because somebody recommended you, or were you pursuing this? So when you got that call, of course, it was surprise, elation, but it also wasn't out of the blue. You were
Hmm.
pursuing this thinking, like, I just keep pursuing all the things I want to pursue. It, the baby hasn't changed anything.
Yeah, that was it exactly. I mean, I was at a point in my career where I felt like I wanted a new challenge. I was ready to grow. I didn't necessarily, I mean, if I'm really honest, I didn't think I would get the job. I mean, I thought, well, I'll just throw my hat in the ring and at least I can say I tried. And so I really wasn't planning to uproot my whole family. And of course, I'm so grateful for the opportunity and I'm so glad I did. It has changed the trajectory of my life in so many positive ways. And you're right. I mean, the administration was incredibly welcoming to working mothers. And also, even in the best of situations, navigating feeling like an outlier when the way that my colleagues and I were getting to know each other was often over happy hour, and late in the day. And I needed to catch that bus so that I could get home to relieve the nanny, right? I remember so acutely those struggles, both internal and I suppose logistical, to actually be a new mom in a really high profile position.
Wow. So I want to know the childcare piece, how that came together. So when you were pregnant, were you planning like, okay, I'll go the traditional route, I'll get full-time daycare and that will be that? Did you look around? Was it, it easier back then, fewer waiting lists? What happened during that time? And then when you made this switch, you said okay, I got to figure out childcare again. Were things smooth? Did you just get there? Someone recommended a place, you put them there, or were there a lot of bumps along the way with childcare?
Oh gosh, if only Diane, right? So when I was pregnant, I'm very close with my mom, and my mom, I think, steered me in the direction of a nanny as opposed to daycare. I think in part because she knew, like just from watching how I was working, that I would need more support and need more, I guess, like less logistics, right? Like having someone come to the house as opposed to taking my child somewhere else. I think she was also informed by having to put me in daycare and the experience of how difficult that was for her. So in any event, when I was pregnant, we knew we wanted to find a nanny, and it was not easy. It's not easy because it's just like difficult to find a good, partner in that. It's also as a new mom, it's incredibly overwhelming. My son was born with a number of challenges that meant we actually needed a lot of high touch support very early on. And so finding the right person to bring into our home was challenging. And then, of course, I'm sure the minute you have something figured out is the minute it changes, right? So, in the first couple of years, well, even when before we moved for my job, we probably had two or three different nannies in the first year and a half. And then once we moved to the Washington, D.C. area, we had a couple more. And so that was its own thing. I don't recommend moving away from family when you have a new child. I mean, that was not something I really realized until my husband and I were sitting in our house with our little baby, 3,500 miles away from any family that we could call on. Maybe don't do that. So my mom actually flew in from California quite a bit, which was amazing. She has since moved to Virginia now, so she's very close and a big part of our village. But navigating childcare, whether that was the early years with a nanny, or even now with school. School in many ways for working parents is a form of childcare as well, right? As much as we want our kids to learn, but there's also just, they need to be somewhere so that parents can work. And
Mhm.
that's something we're continuing to navigate now.
I'm curious what resources you tapped into to find a nanny. Did you try an agency? Did you use an app? Did you ask friends? Did you do all of the above? When you had experiences, like you said, where in a couple years' time you went through, two or three, I went through 12 in 4 years. They weren't all nannies.
Oh.
I tried daycare. I tried pretty much everything you could try in the first 4 years of being a working mom, which is why I started Mom Sub
Mm.
because I loved my career as a television reporter and was thinking like maybe this isn't sustainable because I had this great balance that I wanted of working 2 days a week and being with the kids the other five, but finding anything out of the norm, even finding the norm is challenging enough. So I wonder what resources did you use? How did they work for you? And what kind of stress did you go through when it didn't work?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. So it was mostly asking around first. Admittedly, I think, one of the first, if not the first, in my closest circle of girlfriends to have a baby. So I didn't feel like I had a circle of peers who had been there before or knew someone who knew someone. So I started with friends. I think ultimately I ended up using a website, like kind of a matchmaking website to find caregivers. And then, of course, you go through, you've got to message them, right? And sort of suss out, are your hours and availability right? Then you have to figure out the interview process and bringing someone in. And again, as a new mom, like kind of watching someone else interact with my baby was really challenging. Even my mom was involved because I was like flying blind. It was my first kiddo, right? So, having my mom kind of weigh in. And gosh, the stress of like getting someone started only to then find out, we had one woman who started, and 24 hours later, she said, no, this isn't a fit. Then we also had other people who said, 6 months in, I've been rehired by the family I was working with before. So again, it is a crash course in dealing with uncertainty and sort of, treating things flexibly. But it's a very stressful experience.
How much do you think it would have helped to have a hands-on service like Mom Sub provides, where we're doing all the contacting and vetting and interviewing? You're literally doing nothing but watching a video interview on your phone and deciding if this person's a fit, and then Mom Sub's managing week to week as there's changes
Oh,
and
gosh.
resolving issues if you want a third party to kind of intervene when things get a little rough. What do you think of that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm not as in need of a service like Mom Sub now because my kiddo is a bit more self-managing, but boy, I mean, 150%, when I think back on not just the experience of having to identify candidates and become like an employer and like, do we have a contract? All of that, right? But then just the logistics of, are you available at this time, or something's come up, or your car's broken down, or, oh boy, I'm very curious, Diane, about what you're building.
Well, the whole idea is to reduce the stress, guilt, and self-criticism women go through around childcare by finding and managing the care week to week. But I want to hear about you, and I want to hear, besides childcare, what were the other things that you were managing in this crazy life you were living, where you were in this high powered position around all these people that were making decisions that affected the world, what were you actually doing, and how easy was it to have that identity and then come home at night and
Mhm.
have the baby, throw up all over you and, and not even be able to, have a, conversation with your husband because you're both sort of rushing around and trying to do that. What were the things that you were managing, and were you sort of logging in your brain like you said, this isn't working, or did you hit burnout without even kind of knowing it was coming, like crashing into a
Mm.
wall?
One of the things I really remember during that period, and then later on as I left government, I found myself in a very senior role. I joined the executive team of a small Spanish design firm. So it was me and three other men. I was the first woman on the executive team. And my job was to open up their first US office in Washington, D.C. So I remember, being at this point where I was really at the height of my career and still having to rush home to relieve the nanny at the end of the day, like still dealing with again, my son has some unique and special needs, so still kind of trying to navigate like what's going on here, and what pieces still aren't in place. And I just remember feeling so disjointed and really disintegrated. And actually, the first time I worked with a coach, I worked with an incredible coach named Melanie, who was really, the experience was just so transformative for me. And I remember going to her at this point in my career and saying to her, I just feel like there's work Ashley on one side and there's real Ashley on the other side. And all I want to do is to bring them closer together. Like, I just want that alignment. And it's funny because a big reason why I started my own business in the end is because I wanted to bring those two pieces of myself together. I wanted to feel more whole. And it has been a really strong and clear North Star for me that I want to be able to show up in any space I'm in and be my whole self. And that includes being, a high profile executive, right? But also a mom, and also a creative, and also a curious learner, and a community member. And that's really important to me, so much so that those are the spaces that I seek out. Where can I be my whole person, my whole self? And it's required a lot of bravery, that's for sure, because it's not the default mode for a lot of us.
And so, how did you make this transition? So, when you were in the White House, did you stay there, for both terms, or did your position, have a timeline? And then,
Mhm.
when you found this other position, were you thinking maybe I'll go back to California closer to family?
Oh
Or
gosh.
was your intent like, this is where I belong? Because, like you said, I need to keep moving up to the bigger and bigger things. And then, was that job the last one you had before you went off on your own? And did it wind down, or was it an intention and a difficult thing where you had to make a decision and actually leave? So that's a lot there.
Mm,
Help me understand
yeah.
that trajectory.
Yeah, fit the pieces together. So I grew up in California. I had every intention of working in the Obama administration, and then immediately going back to California. Like, that was the plan. So my fellowship originally was for 1 year. I stayed on for a second year, and then it became clear it was time to leave government for a variety of reasons.
Any
And
of them
so
related to being a woman and family?
Um, more related to I'm ready for a new challenge, and truly the program I was a part of was really meant to be a year-long thing. And then I was like, but hey, this is cool, and we just figured out how to live here. Like, can we stay a little bit longer? So I did a 1 year program with the National Archives, and then another year with the Environmental Protection Agency, really supporting internally their innovation agenda, and how each agency could support citizens and Americans in more kind of human-centered ways. So I did what I came to do, and it was time to leave. I had worked with my coach to find this job with this Spanish firm and really thought like, okay, I've arrived, like I'm shimmying my shoulders, right? Like here I am, world. I've done it. I'm an executive on this leadership team. I get to go to Spain all the time. Like this is an amazing gig. And of course, I'm still like split kind of personality. Like I'm a mom at home. I'm making dinner and doing laundry and like trying to figure out how to take care of myself and maybe get to a yoga class every once in a while or like have a date night with my husband, and then I'm like hopping on a plane to go to Madrid for meetings and stuff like that. So it was still very disjointed. That's when I started, or I had kind of continued working with my coach. And very unexpectedly, about 10 months after I'd been working with this organization, I got laid off. And I mean, in hindsight, there were signs. It felt like the rug was pulled out from under me, but there were a lot of breadcrumbs kind of leading up to it, both in terms of my experience being a woman in this organization that were really challenging, but then also just on a kind of a macro level. I was hired right before the Brexit vote. I was hired right before Trump's first election. And so it just kind of became a different world. And suddenly the organization's priorities were very different than what I had kind of expected coming
So it
in.
had nothing to do with like flexibility you needed as a woman or what you brought to the table as a woman.
It didn't. I mean, there were certainly dynamics around how do I navigate being the only woman on the leadership team,
Okay.
right? And
And
that was,
in a country and a culture where maybe women aren't elevated even as much as in our country and culture. I don't
yes.
know, but I'm just kind of guessing.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say it was complex and not always functional. We can just say that.
Okay.
But I will say, when I got laid off and as I processed the grief and really my anger around what had happened, because with the benefit of hindsight and time, I could really see that a lot of it had nothing to do with me, but also had everything to do with me, like being a woman and being different, being American. It felt personal for a very long time. And as I worked through that, what I realized is that I'd been given an opportunity to really pause and recalibrate. Again, this idea of like desiring alignment and feeling like a whole person really drove me to start considering like what if I could work differently? And very much so based on the fact that I am a woman and I'm a working mom. I remember Diane thinking about again in service of this kind of whole person approach. I started thinking about kind of taking like a personal inventory of myself, and one of the questions I thought a lot about are what are the communities, and using community kind of broadly, what are the groups, what are the personas, even sort of the archetypes that I naturally belong to simply because of who I am. Like I thought about it. Remember, like we'd carry a Blockbuster video card in our wallet. Like if I had membership cards, what would the groups be? And I remember this light bulb going off for me when I realized one of my membership cards that I can authentically own is being a working mother. And so much of my career up to that point had been about compartmentalizing and almost avoiding that reality. Like when I'm at work, and that's what I'm focused on. But we all know that's not true. We all know we can't turn that off, right? And so I don't, right now I'm not doing work like you are supporting working mothers directly, right? But that opening of my field of vision to be able to see that in fact I am a working mom and I can connect with other working moms purely because we both have that membership card in our wallet, right?
That's for
And
sure.
what opens up, what becomes possible when I can own that rather than deny it and maybe even design for it, right? So, very practically, and then I know I'm talking a lot, but I'll pause. But very practically, I've been thinking, even now, my son is almost 13. And we are going through a lot of transition in school. Like the last part of elementary school into middle school has not been kind in many ways. And so my son's school schedule has been very uneven. And what I finally have come to is an honest recognition of how many working hours I actually have in a week. Rather than fighting it, rather than like pushing up against that, just acknowledging I've probably got 20 hours a week that I can really truly work when my son is engaged in other things. And that's the constraint that can help me then be creative about what I do with that time. Right. And that is a luxury. I'm self employed. It's a privilege to be able to own my schedule in the way that I do. And I would really encourage listeners to consider, what is possible when you can be honest about the constraints that you face as a working mother, and actually design with it in mind, like make choices with it in mind rather than fight against it, which is something I did for so long.
And I will say, a lot of people, when you say it's a privilege, it is, no doubt about it. But they think, oh, I could never do that because, she probably has a husband and he makes a good living. And so that's why she's able to do that. She's got a safety net. But I, kind of jumped off the cliff, and did it without a safety net. I have a husband, but he's self-employed and we both were in industries that were low paying. And so don't, if you're listening, think, well, I couldn't do that because I don't have other ways to have income and I couldn't have that unstable income. I'm not saying it's easy and I'm not even saying it's wise, but I mean, I've done all sorts of crazy things, gone into debt, not had the money to pay the bills, but you can't get back the time if you
Mm.
determine that this is what's going to work for me right now. The challenges my 13-year-old's going through and the challenges I'm going through trying to be there for him require this amount of time and effort. And that means work is going to have to only take this amount. So, however, you come to that decision, moving more and more towards the life that you want and design is possible no matter who you are. There's definitely challenges, but don't discount that you can't do what someone else can do. I just kind of
Mm.
wanted to throw that in because I didn't have, all of the resources that you had, but I found out how to be really resourceful. And I want to comment on something you said. We are definitely working directly with working moms to help them, support them, and do something they need. But you're working directly with working moms as well.
Yeah.
So don't say I'm not, you
That's
are.
true.
So
You're
tell
right.
us what you are doing that helps supports working moms, and how you've come to do that and how you've designed whatever it is that you're offering and what it is, because people
Mhm.
hear about a coach. I think everyone kind of knows what that is nowadays, but they do, but they don't because it's all
Mhm.
very different.
Yeah, so I have kind of a unique perspective on my coaching. And thank you for that nudge, Diane. You're right. I absolutely support working moms in my own way. And often that looks like supporting them in designing their next career or life chapter. So, my work at the White House and even before then was really in the world of innovation. So, how do organizations and teams create new ideas and bring them to life? Right. Essentially, innovation is all about change, really. And so I spent a number of years practicing and teaching people how to take the methods and mindsets of innovation to create change inside their organizations, for their customers, and so on, even for citizens, again, when I worked in government. What happened when I got laid off is that I realized that this same toolkit of innovation methods and mindsets could be applied to my own career and could be used to help me innovate when it came to designing work that was more humane and honest and authentic and sustainable for what my life needed it to be, right? So, what I do now is I take those same methods and mindsets from the world of innovation. I combine them with the methods and mindsets of coaching because I'm also a formally trained coach. And I now help people, particularly women and especially working moms. So, women in their 30s, 40s, even 50s who are picking their heads up and really questioning, wait a minute, is this what it's all about? Or wait a minute, none of this is working for me. So it's either coming from a place of feeling really stuck, like this is not sustainable, this does not give me meaning. Or even sometimes I'm wasting my time and my potential. I hear that a lot. Sometimes it's also starting from a place of, I want more, I want better, I want different. But essentially, starting where something's not working and then working with them to help them get clear on what matters right now. There's often this sense of like, I mean, I face it in my own career. I've been doing the same thing for a number of decades now. That's what I do, right? But there's an opportunity to take a step back and say, well, wait a minute, you're not the same person you were when you declared a major in college, right? Like, who are you today? What matters to you today? What do you imagine for your future today? So, helping my clients get really clear on those priorities and those values, those goals. And then from there, taking what I call iterative action. So rather than ripping off the band aid and quitting your job with no safety net, right? We want to be looking at small, bite sized, incremental steps you can take every day to move yourself in the direction you want to go in. So that's really how I help my clients with Wayfinders Collective. As you mentioned, Diane, I've also just recently launched a new project called Life Design School, which is really a creative studio for anyone navigating questions of career and life transition. I have some on demand workshops available now where I teach, again, these innovation methods. And I'm hoping over time to grow it really into a community of life designers, women like us who are asking really curious questions about where we're going and how we can create a life that we love.
And where do people find you?
Yeah, so I am very active on Instagram and LinkedIn at Ashley
Under,
Jablow.
okay,
Yeah, yeah.
Jablow.
Jablow. And you can also go to lifedesignschool.co and see all sorts of offerings, including a free workshop I have there called the Clarity Kit, with the goal of helping you get clear. So you can start there.
So you're sharing so much of what you learned during your journey after coming to many realizations over time. I wonder if you could go back to an earlier version of you and coach an earlier version of you. What would you change? What would you do differently if you knew then what you know now?
Oh, I mean, how much time do we have, right? I would share a lot of life lessons, I suppose. But I think the thing that comes to mind right now is a message for my younger self and maybe even for today's Ashley is to be brave. It takes a lot of courage to step out, to be honest and say something's not working for me, or even to say this has not worked out the way I expected it to, and then to bravely really declare, right? First inside ourselves, and then maybe in our inner circle with a coach, our friends and family, and then, of course, even more broadly, that I'm going in a different direction. It takes a lot of bravery, and I guess, that can feel really lonely. It can feel really isolating, but I'll just remind everyone, as I have the privilege of getting to talk with people who are designing their next chapter all the time. There is an incredible community of kindred spirits out there who are also choosing to be brave and design work that fits their whole life. So I would just encourage you to keep going, be brave, and find community because there are others out there.
Well, congrats for you bringing out that courage in yourself, in your life. We all have it, right? And sometimes it just takes a little inspiration. If you were inspired by today's story, remember to share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe to meet our next amazing guest. If you want to invest in a solution to the childcare crisis, check out MomSub's equity crowdfunding campaign at momsub.com/invest, or connect with MomSub on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all our other social media channels. That's MomSub, like a substitute mom. And remember, your career, your choices, and your success are yours to define. So keep pushing boundaries and spreading your love and encouragement to other women who need it.